Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's 6 p.m. on the 4th of January 2021, and Happy New Year to everybody. I'm Councillor Steve Bartlett, and I'm the Chair of the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Overview and Scrutiny Board. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here for this meeting of the second meeting of today's Overview and Scrutiny Boards. So without further ado, could I just pass over to Claire just to give us some information on how this meeting will be conducted. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Board is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council's website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. Always turn on your video function when invited to speak. Please state your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Some people may need to dial into the meeting and will therefore not have the benefit of visual. Please mute your microphones whilst not talking. If you would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. The messaging bar should not be used unless you are raising a point of order or providing the wording for a motion. Please remember that this panel is visible to all and subject to public information requests. If at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise your hand feature again. If a vote is required on any item, the Democratic Services Officer will call out each board member's name beginning with the Chairman and Vice Chairman, and please respond to this with a for, against or abstain. Finally, please could you ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones or other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies. Do we have any apologies, please, Claire?
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, we have apologies for this meeting from Councillor George Farquhar, and Councillor Lewis Allison is substituting for him, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So I think that takes care of agenda item 2 as well then. Declarations of interest. Members, do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any local interests of any items on the agenda? Not hearing anything. Agenda item 4, public issues. Claire, do we have any public issues this evening?
There are no public questions, statements or petitions for this meeting, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Members, with your consent, I'd like to just rearrange the order of the agenda slightly. We've got the Freeport bid at agenda item 6, and if you won't mind, I'd like to bring that one forward and do the Cabinet Member report for Regeneration after that, if that's possible. Any dissent from that? No, okay, we'll take that as agreed then. We'll go to agenda item 6, scrutiny of regeneration, economy and strategic planning related cabinet report. And this is specifically about the Freeport bid. And I'd like to introduce Councillor Philip Broadhead, who is the portfolio holder for regeneration, economy and strategic planning, to introduce this paper to us. So thank you, Phil, if you wouldn't mind going ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Relatively brief. Members will have read the paper, and I'd like to leave as much time for questions as possible. This cabinet paper is around giving approval for the council to submit an expression of interest for the government's Freeport bidding prospectus. In November, government announced that they were opening up the bidding process to 2 areas, ideally led, or it's certainly in conjunction with the private sector, for those areas that were interested to come forward with an expression of interest in their area becoming a Freeport. That's a multi-stage process. So what happens is that this paper is about, do we want to put our name into the running to be a Freeport? If we do, what are the broad parameters of the type of Freeport we would like? What's essentially our pitch? And then that's stage 1. And then if the government has indicated they'll look at up to 10 areas that they'll then select for Freeports, And at that stage, we'll work up a more detailed business case around exactly what that means. So I'll put that caveat there at the beginning, because we will have some time to flesh out exactly, if we are successful in this endeavour, what we want our free port to look like. But the paper is just to seek approval that we actually want to be part of that process, want to put our hat in the ring, to try and bid for it and unlock some of the benefits that free ports bring. So I'll just go briefly and just draw out a few things in the paper, the kind of traditional what, where and how. As it says in the paper, free ports are designated areas where goods can be imported from outside of the country without paying customs duties. The customs duty only becomes payable when the products actually are then progressed into the domestic market afterwards. And I think the government's thrust of all of this is that what free ports can do is to, in a post-Brexit world, try and really focus on that global trade and investment for the country, to try and generate additional trade growth, make it easier and more efficient. They should also be, and this is, I think, where they're putting a lot of the focus on these free ports, a springboard for regeneration and job growth in the area. And as I'll go on to in a little while, this is not a council-led process. This is something that's been undertaken with a number of partners. And what we're hearing from government is that what they want to put front and centre is, if you do wish to be a free port, how are you going to use that to really regenerate the local economy, to use it as a regeneration tool for the area in general, and create jobs. So really, that's the thrust of what the government's trying to do with these free ports, and that's the basis for what they want to see bids come forward on. And then the third part about why the port is to try and create what they call hotbeds of innovation, and that can relate to a number of different things. Obviously, it is port specific, so it tends to be in relation to air, rail, or maritime, but you can also look at non-port related innovation. And as you'll see through our bid, I think one of the areas that we potentially could lead on quite positively is to be an area of not quite the scale of other ports, but actually much smarter. And it's pretty clear as we look to the post-COVID world that we want to try and bounce back our economy as much as possible. If we can be on the front foot with many of the things that we already do well in the BCP area, around that innovation, that digital connectivity, and that kind of smart port, then I think that could be a pitch that would and could work for us, but B, actually potentially catch the eye of government. So that's essentially, the why around free ports. In terms of what they what actually it means to an area, there are a number of tax benefits for those areas that are within the free ports. There are a number of benefits for the areas as well. Things like retention, local retention of business rates is something that we would get as part of a free port. Those businesses that are in the area can get up to 100% relief on certain sites of business rates for 5 years, although that cost is redistributed back by government, so it doesn't negatively affect the area. There are some planning bonuses as well, and a number of other things which are detailed in the paper. So in terms of how we're taking this forward, we've been working with a number of partners. The main consortium is the Rigby Group, that are the owners of the Bournemouth International Airport, the Poole Harbour Commissioners that obviously run Poole Harbour, ourselves, and the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership, who are, and we're all kind of have collective roles in this, but the LEP have taken a pretty front and centre role as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is stage one. So this is about an expression of interest. And as part of that, we've got to essentially flesh out in a little bit of detail why us and what would our free port look like. And as I mentioned earlier on, I think it's pretty clear that there are a number of major ports around the country that are interested in this and that we know are putting bids forward for free ports, the closest of which is Southampton. There are others in the southwest as well. And many of those have different USPs, different unique selling points. Most of them, the selling point that they have is that they import and export a tremendous amount and that they have the scale. Now, quite clearly, we don't have the level of scale that some of the really major cities in the UK have. What we do have, as I mentioned earlier on, is a particular focus on things like our smart agenda. We've got a smart place programme, and to try and lead on things like how trade and how ports should run in the future, and to try and pitch ourselves as not the biggest free port, but maybe the most bespoke and most smart free port, so that you could have smart tracking of goods and freights and trucks and freights and things, and working with the high connectivity that we've got in the area. Obviously, we've got an international airport as well, which has one of the longest runways in the country. The Rigby group that run the airport are extremely keen to be driving this forward as well. And it's quite interesting to note, actually, that the airport is undertaking a lot more freight than it used to be. And that can and should be a catalyst for the future. And then finally, the pitch, the thinking at the moment is to respond to the government's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution as well, and to use the free port to really lead on the green agenda as well. So there's a lot of things that we can try and achieve as part of the free port, but really this is phase one. This is a do we wish to be involved or not. There is a cost allocation that we put towards this of £50,000, but it's quite clear as we work with other partners that should we be successful in the initial stage, that is a cost burden that should we develop the full business case going forward, obviously we'd need much further involvement, and there would be more funds that would be needed, and we'd hope to share that with partners as well. So really that's where we are at the moment. This is stage one. Do we want to put ourselves forward as a free port? And if we do, what are the broad parameters of the pitch? And happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead. Members, a very interesting area. I have to confess to knowing very little about free ports, and I suspect a few other members are in the same position. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Stephen, and thanks very much, Philip, for that introduction. I don't confess to knowing an awful lot about free ports, I have to say, although I do know a bit about the general principles of it, and which you've already just outlined. The one thing that you did say that took my attention was the fact that we need to catch the eye of government. And I think that's absolutely relevant. You know, we do need to catch the eye of government, but I'm not sure this will catch the eye of government. Partly because government, you know, this as far as I can see it is not just an economic argument for a free port. There's a political argument as well. It's talked itself into levelling up, and I don't see this area as being part of the levelling up agenda at all. If they're going to hand out these free ports to places, they're going to hand them out to Hartlepool or Grimsby or places like that, which which probably do need levelling up, and there is some economic deprivation. Whilst we can complain about the fact that bits of Poole or bits of Bournemouth may need some regeneration, I would hardly call them deprived in any sense of the word. Mm-hmm. So I've got a bit of a problem with that. I probably disagree with some of my UA colleagues in terms of the tax breaks. I'm fairly in favour of tax breaks, and actually the tax system should work to help regeneration in many respects. So I don't particularly have a philosophical problem with tax breaks as such. I think that's a good thing. You talked about the planning bonus. I think that's the planning bonus will be in favour of the people wanting to develop, not necessarily a planning bonus for the area. In many respects, I suspect that planning bonus will take our rights to object away, and therefore that wouldn't be a planning bonus for us. It will be a planning deficit for us. But there's the lack of deprivation, as far as I could see, is a bit of a problem. But as far as I'm aware, I don't know that well, I have to say, but I don't believe it's a deep harbour, and there's probably a lot of other better harbours for doing international trade, with the likes of Plymouth, I suspect, and we would be presumably competing against the likes of Southampton and Portsmouth, which must be an absolutely bang on case for putting a free port there. I would have thought, and us being just down the coast, I would have thought we would be further down the list, shall we say, in terms of one or two of the advantages you talked about. I saw them a bit of as problems for us, but that was, I think you talked about the distribution week, the distinctiveness. I'm not sure we do have a particularly distinctive area, you know, in which we can turn around and say, yes, we do things this way, and it's distinctive, and you know, therefore you should pick us because we may not be the biggest, but we're the best in that area. I'm not entirely sure that we are distinctive in any particular area, particularly when it comes to imports and exports. And I think you talked about high connectivity. Well, one of the things I've always found, having come down here relatively recently, is that the connectivity down here is not good. You know, we have our train system's not brilliant, or we don't have any motorways in Dorset whatsoever, and so, you know, I think, you know, from a connectivity perspective, we struggle. You know, if it's used as a way to push that forward and to push that better, great, fantastic. But I'm not sure that was your argument. I think your argument was that we currently have a good connectivity, and I would challenge that, to be honest. So those are the points I just want to make.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Before you answer that, Councillor Broadhead, I've got to sort of link into that slightly, and I wondered, have you had any encouragement from government actually to submit this bid? If you could perhaps answer that at the same time as answering and responding to Councillor Cox's comments.
Yeah, sure. And I know a number of other people have questions, so I'll be relatively brief. You know, look, I accept a number of observations that Councillor Cox makes. I probably won't get him to write the prospectus of our area, though, because I'm a little bit more optimistic than he is, I think. You know, as I said in the opening, we are not going to be the free port of choice if scale is the only thing you're looking for. So if the government has said we're going to pick 2 free ports, naturally they're going to be the biggest ports and the ones that are going to be able, on a volume basis, probably be able to unlock the most benefit. However, the indication, and partly to answer your question, Chair, that we've had from government is that what they would like to do with this free port agenda is to look a bit deeper. It's less about, you know, just benefiting areas that are already doing well in a certain area and giving tax breaks. You know, that has its benefits in some forums and its negatives, as I'm sure others will be aware. But it is about trying to create as much bang for the buck as possible. And I do think that is where we do particularly have maybe an angle in on this, in that we can demonstrate to government that if you want free ports that offer huge scale, yes, go to, you know, Liverpool and go to perhaps Southampton and other areas. If you want to look at the 21st century and figure out how you can do things differently, then what we can offer in the BCP area is a much smaller scale, but much more convincing bang for buck and value for money. And in particular, as we look towards the green agenda and we look towards a smart place and smart digital connectivity agenda, that is something that we are good at, that we can do very, very quickly, harnessing a number of areas that we already do well, and demonstrate how the future should look. So in many ways, we could be a test bed for how some of the bigger ports may wish to look at on the future. So I do think we have a particular pitch to government. And as I mentioned earlier on, the conversations that ourselves and actually the partners that we're working with on this have had with government. Government aren't going and telling particular people, we want you to apply, we want you to apply. What they are doing is giving a very clear steer for the type of things that they want to see as the outcomes of a free port. And the 2 words that we hear again and again and again and again are jobs and regeneration. So I think if we can demonstrate that the ability to unlock some regeneration and increased number of jobs in our area, and in particular, if we can demonstrate that those areas already have that, we can do something meaningful in our area and get that bang for the buck, then I do think we have a very credible pitch. So I'm a little bit more optimistic than Councillor Cox is about what we have in the area. The second point I would add is that I do think we do have some areas that we can and should unlock a little bit more. We have the 2nd largest natural harbour in the world. I don't think it's utilised to its capacity from a port point of view. So again, this could and should help to unlock that port even further. And again, the same with the international airport that we have. And then finally, rather than, as Councillor Cox would say, just let others get on and do it, we do have a duty to support our local businesses and local economy going forward. To give an example, one of our major employers is Sunseekers. Sunseekers' main competitor, Princess, are based in Plymouth. Sunseeker are very keen for this to come forward. It will help their business as well. So I'm not going to apologise about being optimistic about our area. I think this expression of interest is something where we do have a credible pitch to put forward, and it'll be interesting to see what government says.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Are you happy, Councillor Cox? Is that the right word?
Yeah, yes, I would just like to, I appreciate everything you've said, and I do think I'm quite optimistic about the area. In fact, I'm probably a bit too optimistic about the area, insofar as I think it's a lovely area to be, and it's nice, and there's a lot going on here, and therefore that's my problem with it, is that it doesn't qualify for any of the government's levelling up agenda effectively. But one thing I just wanted to come back on was you mentioned sun seekers. That were very keen for it. Are they contributing towards this? Have we asked them for a donation towards this £50,000? Is it just us that are just paying for this £50,000, or are Rigby and Poole Harbour paying as well?
Yes, Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm not entirely sure. I'm just looking through, and Chris Shepherd may be able to help me out about the financial contribution of our co-bidders on this. But I do know that if we are successful and move forward, there is an expectation that we're all in this together. A number of people, a number of businesses, a number of organisations will be benefiting from this. And as we continue a more full business case, should we be successful, I think it's pretty incumbent that cost burden will be shared as well. I think at the moment, certainly for this initial phase, this £50,000 is being led by the local authority.
Thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead. You content, Councillor Cox?
I'm not content. No, I don't think it's right that we should be the sole contributor towards this. I think this is if this is a joint effort, then everybody should contribute towards it. I'm not. I don't see why we should be the sole contributor at this stage. It's a pretty speculative, and I'm not against speculating on these things. I think it's a good thing. But if other private enterprises are going to benefit from it, then they should contribute towards it as well. Just my opinion.
Come back on that, Councillor Broadhead.
Well, yes, and as I mentioned, two parts. First of all, this is an expression of interest. As we build up a business case, there will be considerable more investment to come, and that will be shared with our colleagues. Secondly, we are a bit time limited on this. We've got to get on with this. This came out in November. We've worked closely with the partners. They have put a lot of time and effort into this as well, notably the Rigby Group and others. So we do this, we put forward these bids. So I think it's fine that we take the lead on this. But yes, going forward, I completely agree that cost burden can and will be shared.
Thank you. Can I move on then, Councillor Cox? Okay, thank you. Councillor Kelsey.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Philip, just a couple of quick things. I was going to ask about the cost, but you've covered that already, so happy with your explanation on that. Councillor Cox mentioned about the infrastructure side of things, but I'm looking at it slightly differently, that if we were to become a free port, in your opinion, would that then help the highways department, trains, etc., to improve the links that we have going north to south in the county, i.e. from Poole Harbour up through to M4 junctions and things like that? Because at the moment, there's nothing planned for that. So I would see having something like this as a really good reason for that to now be done, to improve our infrastructure and transport links to the airport, from the airport back to our train stations, etc.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I completely agree, and Councillor Cox did talk about it earlier. He said if there was some possible tangible benefits out of this, such as that increased infrastructure investment in the future, then it would only be a good thing. I think you can never fully nail these things down, can you? But if we were chosen as one of the government's areas to be a free port, and investment flowed in from that, and regeneration flowed in from that, and we became a leader in this type of free port as we're pitching for, and I think one would hope it's inevitable that would open up other doors for us in the future. You also obviously have to figure out how to play government's game with these things as well, in that if we became a free port because we were chosen by them to be a free port, then they want to see us succeed, which one would hope then puts in as a much more favourable position for other bids that help facilitate that that further success in the future. So these things are linked. I think that for what is a relatively small amount of upfront cost and effort with partners, that we would be probably missing a huge opportunity not to put in an expression of interest for all of those reasons.
Thank you. Can I move on, Councillor Kelsey? You okay?
Yep, absolutely fine. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jackie Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kelsey had asked one of my questions about the infrastructure, but I don't know the value of the freight that goes through Poole at the moment, but would be a free port and obviously an increase in freight coming in, would that affect the leisure industry at all? Because for me, Poole Harbour is more of a fun harbour. You know, you see the people on their not the jet skis, windsurfers. And of course we've got the oyster beds and all that sort of thing, so I would be a little bit worried about that. But also on the leisure side, at the moment we can only go to the Channel Islands or France. Would it open up for more travellers to go to other places other than Cherbourg and the Channel Islands? Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Edwards. It's a good question. I don't know the answer, except to say that, you know, as investment comes in and an area starts to do better, then invariably investment tends to follow investment. I don't, you know, as I mentioned earlier on, it's the second largest natural harbour in the world, so I don't think we've got a particular capacity issue in terms of a transit through the harbour. And indeed, you know, one of our partners in this is the Harbour Commission itself. Who are, you know, who clearly recognise that there are benefits to this, you know, and would be aware if there were capacity issues. So I don't think we need to be worried about, you know, the binary choice between more freight and less leisure. But I would agree that, you know, when you do see investment into an area, particularly into the port, which, you know, probably could do with some investment, then one would hope that there would be added benefits to that as well.
All right, Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thank you. When you're including the area around the Freeport area, are we including Purbeck in any of this? Are they going to be part of future discussions?
Not in my understanding at this stage. At the moment, the centrality of our bid is around both the port and also something that we're not talking about as much, which is the airport as well. There's not that many areas that have that dual kind of offering of an international airport in relatively close proximity to a major port as well. So it's just the parameters of that area. And I think that's pretty central to our bid, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vikki Slade.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am slightly worried about this, I have to be honest. I did talk at some length when I was representing BCP on key cities about whether or not a free port was right for our area. And during that time, it was sort of concluded that perhaps it wasn't. So I've got a number of concerns. The first is, I am slightly worried about the description that I've been hearing over the last 15 minutes of Poole Harbour, because Poole Harbour is the second largest natural harbour in the world, but it's also an average of 1 metre deep, with a very specific channel, which even sailing boats have to carefully make their way through. Unless you're on a paddleboard or a canoe, you pretty much are limited to a single channel. It's also a site of special scientific interest, and therefore any massive expansion of freight cargo would put that at risk. And I would have thought that the risk of damage to our harbour and the use of it for pleasure would be a major contributor in saying, actually, it's never going to be a Southampton or a Felixstowe or a Hull or a Bristol, and nor should it be. And actually, it would be far better to concentrate the effort on expanding it as a port, as a cruise ship port, and as servicing something like a wind farm off our shore, where actually it can, you know, it can expand in a much more holistic way. So I'm really concerned to hear several people not appearing to really understand very much about Poole Harbour. In terms of the costs, I've spoken to Portsmouth and Southampton, and they're not being asked to contribute. I've read up quite a lot about the process of a free port,
And the government consultation and bidding process was quite clear in saying that it should be private sector led. So I'm really worried about why, if it's a private sector led development, why the LEP isn't actually funding the first stage. And if they're not, so either we're each paying 50,000, in which case 200,000 is a lot of money for a first stage proposed, or we're paying all of it, in which case I'm really uncomfortable with that. I don't think we should be making a first stage proposal without having an understanding of what our potential costs, if we're successful, full bid together is, because this has to be done by mid-February, as I understand it, and the full business case is only April. So there isn't a lot of time for that full business case. And therefore, if we're past that first stage, and frankly, Phil, I love your ambition and your optimism, but I don't think we've got a hope in hell of getting past the first stage, because I genuinely don't think what we're offering is really fitting the criteria of what I've read. But if we did, and all credit to you if you get it through, the time frame for second stage, which you've yourself said is more expensive, is very short, and I'd like to know where that money would come from. And also, I just wanted to get your thoughts, if you don't mind, on the detail in the bidding process, which first of all says that they would expect that most areas applying for this, and there will only be a maximum of 7 in England, will be areas with combined mayoral authorities, which we're not. But there should also be plans to develop skills in these new technologies and research. And although Jet Zero is talked about in our paper, I'm not aware that Jet Zero is something that the college or the university are particularly up on at the moment. So where's the evidence that they're going to be able to fill that space? And the second bit is, can you tell me whether the port has applied for the Green Energy Fund announced in October, the £200 million Port Infrastructure Fund, or the £200 million, what's the third one? There's a third one they're expecting you to have applied for, the new board, the Getting Building Fund schemes, because there seems to be a lot of cohesion in the documentation from the government that they're expecting ports to have already been looking to invest. And I haven't seen any evidence of that locally. And finally, my understanding, if please correct me if I'm wrong, about free ports is the stuff comes in, it's turned around, so it comes in as a widget within the customs zone, it's turned from a widget into a thing, and then it goes back out again. So I'm assuming that we think we can construct a whole thing from widget to final thing between Poole Port and Bournemouth Airport. And I'm not convinced that there's enough of a manufacturing base within that envelope of space to actually hit the mark. So I might have misunderstood it, but I'm worried that there's lots of great ideas here, and this might fall into being some great things we can do, but I don't think they fulfil the criteria of this particular scheme. So I don't mean to be negative, because I think the idea is great, and Graham will tell you I did ask him, and I've got emails that say, what are we doing about the possibility of a free port? And we sort of said, I don't really think it's for us right now. So I'd really love to hear your positivity again. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slade. So some nice easy questions for you there, Phil. Would you like to try to answer them?
Scribbling notes. Councillor Slade was delighted to hear that she's about to hear my unbridled positivity again. Just on the last point first, if that makes sense, around other areas that she mentioned earlier on that are considerably more advanced in this, both in terms of their bid and in terms of the financial structures regarding the bid. She's entirely right, because they've been working on it for months, because those areas took a proactive decision to engage within this from the off when this was first announced, or even before it was announced around a year ago. Obviously, the BCP Council, previous to the administration, this administration coming in, had taken the view not to progress it. So we've had a very limited time having made the decision that actually it is something we should look at to try and get ducks in a row quickly. That's predominantly why we've had to lead from the front on this from a financial point of view. Although, as I said earlier on, actually a great deal of the enthusiasm, energy and detailed work is being done by those private sector partners that we're working with. And just before I move on from the port, because I think this has been very port heavy and actually, harbour heavy, and actually it is probably, if anything, more about the airport than it is about the port. But, you know, I can't answer every question on behalf of the Poole Harbour Commissioners, but they are front and centre of this bid. And very involved in it, and they know what they know. So they are the experts on their port and the harbour and what the capacity is or isn't, and they're clearly in favour. But as I just mentioned, actually, the main, I think, USP that we have is actually around the airport, not just in terms of its current offering, but in terms of the real potential. There's that's where the land is. If you were, and it makes clear in the summary, and also as we start to flesh out the bid. That is where the development and expansion for freight can and should be around the airport area, not around the port area. I said earlier on that there are some areas of the harbour that maybe could do with a bit of attention, but actually the real potential is around the airport area. And as I mentioned earlier on, the Rigby group have been front and centre of this, recognise that this really could help to really put ourselves on the map in terms of expanding the offering there. And doing so in, as I mentioned earlier on, a clever way. And again, you know, as Councillor Slade pointed out, I don't think it's right for the area. I don't think we're quite got all the things that other areas have. I don't think our offering is good enough. Well, I think it's our job to sell what our offering is, isn't it? So rather than just look at our bigger neighbours and say, well, we can never be as good as them, it's either to aspire to be as good as them or to recognise that we can and should do things differently. We are not going to be submitting the same Freeport bid that Southampton is going to bid for. What we can do, however, is say we've got some areas that could really have some unbridled regeneration, particularly in this area. This will help us to do that. This will help us to create jobs. And as I said earlier on, could potentially give a much greater bang for your buck than other or more established areas. So, you know, I really do think that for a relatively small investment that we can do this. And just the final point, Councillor Slade mentioned, well, it's only 7 in the area. Well, we've had conversations, and the leader has had conversations directly with Rishi Sunak fairly recently, who has said he is not wedded to have only 10. And if he sees interesting bids that are within there, he will go beyond 10. There may be a second bidding round at some stage. And much clearly, there's a lot more detail that will need to be fleshed out on this as we go through if we're favoured with getting into the next round.
8 o'clock this evening, if possible. But if we go at this rate, I don't think we're going to be able to. We've got a number of speakers still lined up wanting to talk. Anyway, I just, if you could just bear that in mind. But Slade,
can I just come back very briefly?
Yes, of course you can. Yes.
Request. Can I please ask, because I do still have concerns about spending our taxpayers' money on something which is private sector led. So can I please ask that we know Cushman and Wakefield are going to be doing this work because it's being done on behalf of the bid rather than through a tender process. That I accept that, which suggests it's then a LEP-led project. Can we get a commitment that you go away and you tell us how much stage 1 is costing, if it is just us that's paying, and what the costs of a full bid in April will be, so that we know what the potential costs to this authority will be in the positive thinking that you will get past stage 1. I would be grateful if we could have that, and I will defer to others on any other points.
That's the Broadhead.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Oh, good. Excellent. So that's a commitment. Is that something we can just notice in action in our minutes then? Would that be all right? Thank you very much. Okay, who have we got now? Councillor Allison.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cox said in his question something that made me laugh. It was talking about people who are philosophically for and against the Freeport bid process or the system. I think it's safe to say, if anyone's read the letter in the Echo, that I'm one of those who would fit in the very much against category. I think that the way that the government has approached this is pretty much fantasy. You know, there's lots of people who have written extensively, economists, think tanks who have analysed this process and basically refute all of the things that the government have put forward about how much economic benefit this will bring to local areas. I could probably talk for days, but in the interest of this meeting, I've just got a couple of questions about the paper itself. So the first one is that the recommendations here says that the officers will be allowed to further develop the business case subject to receiving a successful application. So I just wanted to check, can we get clarification? Does that mean that this is the only time that ONS or the Cabinet will see this Freeport bid, or will we have another opportunity once the bid has been fleshed out and we've got a greater understanding of what the boundary is and the jobs, etc.? We'll be able to go through all of that information when it's available. And the second one is the whole bid process, as you rightly say, is about jobs. And every time the Prime Minister or the Chancellor have spoken about the Freeports, they've been very clear that they're trying to create high-skilled, high-salary jobs. And yet, in the document we've got about the national insurance contributions, we see that the rate relief is only for jobs under £25,000, and that to me indicates that the jobs that we're looking to create with these Freeports are not high-skilled and not high-paid. They're you know, it will be people working in warehouses, etc., manufacturing, and it won't bring a whole lot of good jobs for the local area. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on the question in particular about whether it would come through ONS and further approval before the bid it goes forward? Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, no, thank you, Chair. I'd be keen for overview and scrutiny to be involved further once we had fleshed out a little bit more in that business case, exactly the details of the bid. I suppose it's a timing issue, isn't it, as much as anything else, in terms of how much time we would have. But you know, should we be able to accommodate that, I'd be absolutely more than keen for either overview and scrutiny to be involved, or via any other mechanism, whether you wanted to create a working group or whether we had a member seminar or workshop. You know, either way, the more the merrier as far as I'm concerned.
Well, one would assume that the financial limits would dictate that it went through council and even full council possibly at some stage anyway. So I think, you know, it's not going to go forward without further authorisation, is it?
Again, completely agree. So yes, I would expect more involvement going forward. Councillor Allison is right. The recommendations, I think the recommendation 4 that he's referring to is about not needing to go back to Cabinet once more to start working on that business case, rather than delegating the full decision making of that business case going forward. So I think that's the spirit of it. But you've heard the commitment from me for as much involvement as possible. Okay,
are you content, Councillor Allison?
Yeah, just one. I want to come back on one thing, which is that he mentioned in this reply and in the reply to Councillor Slade as well about timing. I think it's not just the fact that the previous administration didn't choose to go forward on a Freeport bid that you're having issues with timing. I think government has to take some responsibility for that too. They've been talking about Freeports since 2015, and yet the bid process is only just now taking place after we've left the European Union. So the idea that timing is something that's wholly down to the council, that you're being confined due to that, it is not true. It's also because the government have been slow on bringing this forwards.
Okay. Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Broadhead?
No, it is what it is, isn't it? You know, I would hope, and I appreciate Councillor Allison has some ideological differences on this, which is unusual, because most of the Freeport areas that are bidding are Labour-controlled areas, and all of the MPs that I've seen have been very positive about their own bids. So I would hope that we can try and get some collective support and positivity to try and move this forward. But appreciate I'm not going to please everybody.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Howell.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I kind of share the ideological point of view. It's not really ideological. I just think it's fact, really, that it will result to a race to the bottom nationally. We'll just lose out on taxation. But when you talk about, you know, we're forced to think about this locally, and therefore we're put in a position where we compete against other areas in the country, and we've got to look at it that way. You know, it worries me a lot about you know, it's another example similar to the regeneration bids that come late to the party, that there's a bid proposed, and then we say, oh, let's try and put together a bid and put things together in a way that might be appealing to government, rather than having put the work in beforehand to develop a bid that's on the shelf, oven ready, overused word. But that's really, I think, what government is probably looking for in these situations. And we just give us too little time. I think that the year and a half that you say that we've lost, I don't think even back then that would have made any difference to that, because what we needed is council and local businesses to develop a proposition ready for an opportunity like this to come along. Now, it may well be good to just go through this process to kickstart that kind of thinking for the future, because in principle, getting improving these links and thinking about what businesses are suitable to attract to the area, that's all good, and a good thing that may come out of this. But I'm just a bit wary that in the first stage the government will just allow everybody to lots of places that have a bid submitted as an expression of interest to get a yes on the basis that it doesn't, it just looks good for them. But then we incur the money of the second stage, and we lose the second stage because, we're fundamentally that, we're not in the position really to win it. In terms of the Poole port, I'm a bit worried about, and I suppose this applies to the airport as well, about looking at the airport, because when you look at an aerial photograph, there doesn't seem to be much spare space there for actually building upon, and whether that's an issue, whether we have enough space to build something new, and could one of the consequences be, and perhaps Councillor Broadhead could confirm this, is that for existing businesses that suddenly find themselves within the zone, we don't lose any of the business rates at all in that situation, because you could see that Sunseeker would be included, and then they'd be able to build boats, which most of them go abroad, so they'd go straight up to China or something, and we could be just facilitating a way for them not to pay tax to us locally, while not creating any jobs, because the jobs are already there. I do think that the other 2 points were that I'm worried about the port expansion point. I've not heard any suggestions that there's before from the port that there's opportunity for expansion in any significant scale. It's limited in space. The big issue in the harbour is that there's a maximum size of ship that can get round Brownsea Island, because there's a curve there, and that is the limiting factor in the harbour, which I'm not sure anything can be done about that. And the final point, to be a bit more positive at the end, is that I think our space has to be in kind of IT and developing high-tech engineering, that kind of thing. If that's ignoring this, whether we include it in this or not, just moving forward, those are the kind of jobs that we want. These kind of things don't necessarily require a lot of space, so that's beneficial for us. We need to get, and it potentially links in with building out the regeneration area and Poole and other things, because you could imagine people who have those jobs perhaps living locally in flats, etc., if it's done to good enough quality. So I think that's the area that we're kind of most likely to present a good offer in. But the trouble is, does that meet the levelling up ambitions, as Councillor Cox said earlier, if we build it around that kind of concept? Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Sorry. Councillor Broadhead?
Yeah, no, I'll respond very briefly. There was a number of points there. First of all, I'd actually completely and utterly Howell's first point, which is that we need to stop being reactive to government bids. There tends to be a relatively good gestation period for a number of these, not even necessarily for the open period, but quite often you can see these things coming in terms of the bids that are coming from government. And also, as we found actually in the past in a number of the preceding authorities, sometimes you can bid for stuff that's not on the table. You know, the best bids are the ones that don't actually exist. So I completely agree to him. We need to have a much more concerted effort about not scrambling at the last minute and going, oh, it'd be nice to put in for that and just whack it in and hope for the best. Because, you know, we need to be a lot more substantial in our thinking and much more ambitious in our pitch. Here, we've had to be very reactive because the previous administration decided that they didn't want to bid for this. So we are a little bit reactive here, but I'm still convinced that it's the right thing. The second point I would add is that there's also, yes, there's the argument about why we should be doing this. There's also, to use the old argument, is that, you know, what are the dangers of not doing this? There's the displacement argument that if we do not do this, then other areas will, other jobs and investment could and will go to other areas, and therefore the bid is about protecting jobs as much as creating them. And I do think there's a big argument in that. And then the final point, in terms of space, the Rigby group are very involved in this bid, and I'm sure will be the key drivers going forward, because the airport has tremendous amounts of potential and space for development, for creating jobs. We've already got a lot of engineering, aeronautical and other businesses there at present, and there is tremendous scope for more. And I'm not going to apologise for trying to be ambitious for the area and try and unlock some potential, because if we don't do it, it'll go somewhere else.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Broadhead.
Can I just ask?
Yeah, well, if you could be as quick as you could.
Yeah, it's just the business rates point. You know, I'd like, you know, some confirmation, perhaps from an officer, that we wouldn't lose the business rates in relation to existing businesses that move into that space, however much that they pay their employees, or, you know, whatever. There's that we wouldn't lose out in that situation.
Can you answer that, Councillor Broadhead?
I don't know the detail around the specific number of different options within the business rates thing, but if we don't have the answer now, I'll come back to you on that later.
Okay, if we could just put an action then in a minute, so that you'll come back to us on that. Thank you. Councillor Fear.
Thank you, Chair. I will try and keep my comments brief. I listened to this whole debate. I think it's been a really good debate, and I'd like to just thank the Cabinet member for his answers. It's not my questions down quite considerably, so thank you for that. I think optimism breeds optimism. I think that's what this paper has been saying to me when I've gone through it. Looking at point 23 in it, you know, bang for our buck. Obviously, you know, we aren't these big places. You know, we are unique in BCP with the two ports that we have, and I think that's why we have to go down this smart port route. I've just got 2 points. There's point 20 where it says about the universities and the colleges. Obviously, BU is in the top 100 in the world universities recently I've seen, and I think, like Councillor Slade said earlier, holistically, I think we need to look at this on a bigger scale. So obviously we'll be having the ports, but this is something that we advertised as well. So it's just kind of roping in not just trade coming in and trade going out, it's also advertising what is also here, because obviously companies that may ship through us, if we are successful, may then want to set up some sort of base here as well as a go-between. You don't know. That's why I say opportunities breed opportunities. So I think it's the bigger the scale we can look at it, the linking up, the better. And the only other point I'd just like to put to the Cabinet member is just to confirm that the two ports are enthusiastic and are very positive and do want to give this a real go, and that's why we want to do that, and we're really trying to pull ourselves together. That's what I've taken from the paper, but I'd just like to have that confirmed by the Cabinet member. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Fear. He makes some really good points, particularly around that that positivity. And actually, one of the things that I've found from the past is that there's always positive unintended consequences to a number of these things as well. So I mean, already as a result of putting this bid together, the working relationship we now have between the Rigby group, the LEP, but the Poole Harbour commissioners has gone from strength to strength. That can only be a positive in the future. If we are favoured with going through to the round, the next round on this one, invariably we'll be working closer with even more partners from across the private and public sphere, which can only be a benefit, even if it ends up coming to nothing. That in and of itself is probably worth the journey. And the other thing I've found is that there's no such thing as a failed effort. There are always, quite often there are second rounds, there are things you discover as part of the bidding process, different areas that you didn't know about that are often worth doing as well. And I've never, in my time doing this, never have I ever said, oh, I wish we hadn't bid for that. We've often said, why the heck didn't we bid for something? But we've never said, why did we bother with that? Because there are always positive consequences. So, but I completely agree. Optimism breeds optimism. Private industry is crying for us to take a lead and be ambitious, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to add to Vikki's observations about the harbour, my understanding is there's an average depth of 18 inches. It is an awkward harbour because the seabed is constantly moving, hence the need for dredging. And indeed, on occasions, the channel buoy markers move and I have to update my charts. There is one main channel, which is a limitation. However, I do like the concept of a unique approach via the smart pool, and for the price, I actually think it's worth us taking our chance. And as the portfolio holder has indicated, it does show, I think, an important commitment to the businesses that are based in the area. The other thing I would add, it's been rather a sort of internal focused on Poole or BCP debate, but I'm also assuming that it opens up or could open up business opportunities to the surrounding councils and authorities, and how will they be brought in to add value to a free port in Poole? Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
God, where's my crystal ball? I mean, it's a very good point, and something that I think we'd be working on if we were. It's probably a next round argument, if I may, Councillor O'Neill, in terms of how do we really maximise the benefits of Freeport going into the future. So I don't quite know how they would fit in. I would just correct you on your last point. This is not a free port for Poole. This is a free port for Bournemouth and Poole, because we have a collective area here that actually fits in and can and should benefit from it. But you're quite right, the benefits shouldn't be confined purely to our urban area. Having said that, we are an urban area that's the size of Bristol, and we need to start having the ambition to match it. So, which is, hence the reason for going for this sort of stuff. But thank you for your support on the concept of a smart port. I think it is what we can and should do well to try and catch the ear of government, and I think that's the centrality of our pitch in this instance.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I could start by just saying I've got no interest or link to the Rigby group, just for clarity. So what I will bring up is a slightly different type. I really do appreciate the enthusiasm which you've got for this, because there are actually some quite potential good things which have come from this. But I do want to touch on the risk assessment and the ability to have some negative aspects. And the thing that I want to talk about would be the ability of the free ports of increased criminal activity. It's something which has been looked at across the board by the EU and also in the US by the State Department, as well as one of the risk factors of giving potentially gives known patterns of criminal exploitation and give international reputational risk to areas which actually have free ports in them. There's linked particularly with trading counterfeit goods, drugs trafficking, smuggling, and also tax evasion as well. And with other larger ports with more manufacturing bases located around them and things like that, where you can sort of, to use Councillor Slade's analogy, turn a widget into a thingy, was not having that area, would we become more of an area, or the risk of becoming an area where perhaps high price items like art could be moved into the country and stored while evading tax and then leave, which brings no tangible benefits to the actual area, but does help people with their tax evasion. And we get more of a reputation as an area where this is taking place, rather than the financial benefits of actually increasing in the area instead.
That's the Broadhead.
Chairman, I'm extremely. My internet logged out for the last bit of that, so I got the beginning bit, which I can answer, and then if I miss anything, then Councillor Rigby, not of the Rigby group, as made clear, can come back. I do think he actually makes a really interesting point, and one that I probably hadn't considered, about the criminal exploitation negatives, if you like, of some of the free ports of the past. Because actually, I think that could be an added part to our pitch. Because if we're going to major on actually, what should a smart port for the 21st century look like, and really show how that could be done, and look at that digital connectivity, that, you know, from beginning to end, full kind of transparency of the process. Then that could be part of the solution to some of the issues that might have blighted some free ports in the past. So might be worth some further consideration, because it could feed into the bid nicely in the future. I've missed your second point, so if I haven't answered it, then please, you know, jump in again.
Yeah, all it was just around the reputational risk that had come to the area if there was criminal activity going on and we became known as an area for tax evasion or other nefarious activities. The risk that would actually run to tourism in BCP and our other industries in you know, IT and web-based ones as well.
Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, all valid points, and all points that I think we need to delve into in greater detail as we come up with the full business case. So yeah, some good identification of some of the risks there.
Thank you. You finished, Councillor Rigby?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Butler, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for being able to attend the meeting today. Yeah, I just have two concerns about the bid report here, item 26 and 27. 26 mentions the 5G waveband, the connectivity issue, which, as you know before, I've been quite concerned about this, the fact that 5G has potential health hazards for radio frequency electromagnetic fields. So this is my worry about this. Do we really need it? The other point is about the Twin Sails Bridge in Poole. Ever since it was built, it's never really worked properly. It's still ongoing repairs, and really, if we're hoping for manufacturing and engineering, maybe we could start looking at companies now that are going to fix it for good and make it work, because we're really going to need a great working bridge if we're going to be an important port. Every important port in England has got a good working bridge. So you know, that is really important. On the upside of it, I think something that would be really useful at both places, airport and port, is actually supplying a repairs facility for boats and for aircraft and for other things. I know at the airport they've already got a fantastic company there that does repair planes, private planes, so that could be increased. And also things like boat building, and also fishing hasn't been mentioned for Poole. The fishermen present they're probably not exporting much, so that could be increased. So maybe we could look at the fishing side of it as well as the leisure side, as well as the work side. It could promote a lot of jobs. They say for every fisherman there are 7 jobs on shore. That's an actual fact that's come from the fisherman community. So they're just my points I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Phil?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. Of course, there's a number of areas. We've actually got a number of industries, particularly around the airport, as Councillor Butler points out, that are internationally recognised and are very supportive of this as well. And anything that we can do to help to support them post-COVID crisis, I think is welcome for many of them. And fishing is another one that we haven't touched on in the past. Although, as I mentioned earlier on, the boat building is actually something that we're also very well recognised for. As I mentioned, Sunseeker are extremely excited about this. Should it go forward? Just to directly address the points around the 5G connectivity, and I know Councillor Butler has expressed concerns around this before, and of course I was Chair, and we led the call for evidence over that and put a lot of work into that. And already in our test bed area, I mean, look, we have to be honest, 5G is coming anyway because the commercial sector is doing it. I think what we're talking about in this is creating a little bit like an extended version of what we've got in the Lansdowne, which is a kind of a closed network of real-time connectivity, which could be quite unique, actually. We're already the first area to do that. But the great thing about that you can't have with the commercial sector that's going to go on and do it anyway, is actually the ability to have that real-time health monitoring that we committed to previously on that. So I think in virtue of the fact that 5G is coming anyway, to have some control over it and to have some monitoring over it can only be a very positive thing. Third and final point related to an earlier point that I made, very remiss of me in that I talked about Bournemouth and Poole, but of course it's Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, which the geographical location covers as well. So slap my wrist for that one.
Thank you. Are you content, Diana?
Yes, thanks very much. Thank you.
We've got Councillor Cox wants to come back, and also Councillor Farr, and then Millie Earl. So I think we'll limit it to those 3, if you wouldn't mind, because time is really getting on. Councillor Cox.
Well, actually, I think Phil's already slapped his own wrist, so that was fine. I corrected him on the fact that when he talked about Poole and Bournemouth, that I'd reminded him that the airport's actually in Christchurch, and therefore it was Christchurch, not Bournemouth. But actually that does feed into Councillor O'Neill's point that actually the airport is very, very, very close to Dorset's boundaries, and therefore they would be heavily involved, I suspect, in any free port on that site.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Farr.
Thank you, Chair. I'm an optimist. I'm pleased to hear we're considering putting in a bid for Freeport status. I think it's a great opportunity to seize for local growth, jobs and innovation. I just wonder how likely it is the bid will be successful compared to others. Perhaps is ours more unique? Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead, could you get your crystal ball out again, please?
I mean, just see what it says. It's the 8 ball, and it says you may have a welcome surprise. Look, I think I've been pretty honest in the introduction. We're not the natural free port if you're thinking of free port as something at scale. But we've been dealing with a number of people and talking to a number of parts of government to find out whether we're completely barking up the wrong tree and they're only going to pick free ports that are absolutely, millions of people, millions of jobs and all that kind of stuff, or whether it's going to be something deeper. I get the indication it is going to be something deeper. I mentioned before, government are very keen to use this around regeneration and jobs. And I think if we can demonstrate that we can do that, offer bang for the buck, and sell something a bit different, then I think we may not win this round, but we do have an indication from government that there may be further rounds available as well. So let's keep it all crossed.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Farr?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Millie Earl.
Thank you, Chair. I sort of can't get over the fact that, you know, not just in Poole, but in BCP in general, I just don't feel this is our game as a town. You know, we have a hospitality industry, we have a financial services industry, we also are in some sense, you know, the smart area, like we've got at Lansdowne and with the Silicon development that we see throughout Bournemouth. And my worry is we're sort of breaking off. We should really do already there rather than trying to, in many ways, artificially create something. And I feel like free ports are very much meant for those manufacturing cities. They're going to be used, or are being used, as a political tool to mitigate against the effects of Brexit in areas where they will really, really be impacted, particularly in their manufacturing and development industries. But I just had to say that. But alongside that, what I wanted to ask, we talked a bit about how the second part of the bid will be led by business, but has government given any indication to the cost of that? Just so we can see, you know, this is the £50,000 initial expression of interest. What's it going to be to build a business case? Just so we've got an idea of where this is going. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And as I committed earlier on, I'll come back with that extended information for both the amount that we feel that a good business case would be should we get through to the next round, and also what the burden would be on the council and what those others would be in the private industry, because it's pretty clear that a number of people would benefit from this. And look, the council, you know, potentially will benefit a lot as well, such as, you know, if we're creating jobs, we're creating national insurance, we're creating council tax and employees and VATs that the businesses are generating. So this is not an exercise that should cost the council taxpayer money. Quite the opposite. It should not only bring our economy up and create jobs and be a springboard for regeneration and things, but it can and should bring in money to the council to help us support services as well. So I don't think this is something that you know we need to be negative about the cost for. This should be a real positive. And I'll just end on the point that Councillor Earl brought up, in that, well, this isn't our game. We should be focusing on other things. And I've said this before in these meetings. This is not a binary choice. We don't have to pick one thing that we think we're good at and ignore everything else. Nowhere else does that. We're the same size as Bristol. Do you think Bristol turn around and go, do you know what, we're pretty good on aviation, so we'll ignore everything else? No, they do it all. We have the capacity and the ambition to do everything, to turbocharge our hospitality and our tourism industry, to look at the fintech sector where we do very well and take that to the next level, to look at what we're doing with Wessex Fields in Meditech and take that to the next level, to look at where we have our massive, I mean, our airport is crying out for investment, and to do that, we don't have to pick one. And I think it's actually a little unambitious if we just say we're not very good at that, we're not going to try and do better. We have a lot of things that we're very, very good at, and we should try and do our best with all of them.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I'm going to bring this one to a close now. I'd just like to say a couple of words myself. I mean, we've heard about the potential benefits, we've heard about the challenges, not least is the depth of the water in Poole Harbour. You know, what we haven't done though is talked really about the overall impact on the conurbation. Now, being positive, I guess, you know, you've got to be on the pitch to be able to play, but here I'm not sure that we've actually chosen what game it is we want to play, and I don't think that's the question that's yet been asked. But nevertheless, I think we will see information coming out of this bid. And it will help to feed the sort of information that we're looking for to see how we can develop some of the areas. What I would also say is that what's not missed on me are the relatively good transport links between Southampton docks and Bournemouth Airport. They're not, you know, they're not too bad, and you could argue they're actually much better than they are from the airport to Poole. The other thing is that the airport has got tremendous potential. It's got the longest runway in South England, and you know, it is much longer than, and it can take basically any long haul transport type aircraft. So, it has got the capacity and there's plenty of room there for development. So it has got huge potential. We shouldn't lose sight of that because of maybe some of the complexities and difficulties around Poole Harbour. But it's been a very interesting debate. Nobody has actually made a move to change any of the recommendations. So on that basis, I'll close this debate and move on to the next item, which is going to keep Councillor Broadhead busy again. We've got 3/4 of an hour, Phil, and I've got the forward plan to tuck into this as well if we can. So members, going back to agenda item 5, regeneration, economy and strategic planning. Now, if you recall, as a board, we decided we wanted to get ahead of the cabinet forward plan. We wanted to get some ideas about how various portfolios were developing. And this is the first of those where we've invited portfolio holder to give us an overview of the sort of direction that they're heading in and the sort of things that we as an overview of scrutiny panel might wish to show some interest in. So it's really, it'll be interesting to see how it goes, and this might set the scene for the future for us. So I think I'll ask Phil now if you would give us an introduction to the sort of things that we've asked him to set out for us this evening, and let's see where it takes us. Thank you, Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and happy to be your guinea pig as always. Always up for that. But I do share the aspiration. I think as a collective membership, we really should be as collectively involved in decision making as early as possible. And clues in the title, isn't it? It's overview and scrutiny. We do a lot of scrutiny. We need to be doing more overview. So more than happy to be involved in that. What I was asked to do and what I've tried to do is in a bit of a bullet point form, just to spell out some of the current priorities in my portfolio, some of the future priorities and portfolio development, and then to try and give some possible areas which overview and scrutiny may want to get stuck into a little bit earlier. So I won't talk forever because I cover quite a big portfolio, and once you get me started, as you well know, I can't stop. So I'm more than happy if it helps, mainly to take questions. The guidance I would give is that I think it would be useful to use this time to probe a little bit about some of the things that are looming in the future that we think that members may well wish to get involved with. So in particular, as I point out on items 4 and 5, clearly the local plan is a massive piece of work at the moment. Obviously, the Overview and Scrutiny Board already has now commenced a local plan working group. We need to be all involved in this because it is something which sets the direction for our plan for the whole area in the future, and we are all impacted on this. And I'm just very conscious that the analysis work around that has now largely concluded, and we're now getting to the stage where in a very short space of time we're going to have to go to consultation on this, and we need as many people involved in that as possible. So I'd really welcome as much member involvement within that, because you don't know what you don't know, and there are intricacies of areas that will have knock-on effects, and we all need to be involved in this. It affects every single one of them. And the second part around that is around the green belt. Members will be aware that we put an all-member seminar in for the receiving of the green belt study, which was commissioned earlier on this year, which identifies, which is analysis of our green belt, so that we can have that piece of work to inform bits of the local plan going forward. We all need to be involved in this. Our green belt is very positive to our area, and if we do wish to change any of it or not wish to change anything, it needs to be a collective decision. So those are areas which certainly I'd welcome input from in the future. But then other areas, the future of the high street, I'll be hoping to take forward a paper in the next few months around trying to flesh out a strategy for how we deal with the high street post-COVID, although it's not just post-COVID. There are a lot of problems with the high streets and town centres that all COVID has done is accelerate it. And we'll be looking at ways in which we can be a bit more interventionist from a council point of view in trying to encourage independent shops into some of our high streets. And I'm very grateful for Councillor Brooks for working really closely with us on that and taking the lead on it. And that economic sector in general, how we can focus that going forward post-COVID. We've identified some of the areas in the Freeport discussion which we're already very good at. How can we help them going into the future? And then the final thing that I think might be worth looking into are business improvement districts that we have. Are they working? How do we want to interact with them? Is there a piece of work that Overview and Scrutiny want to do there to figure out how successful they are, how our relationships are with them, and how we input with that? And then finally, just our ambition around housing in the area. What do we want our housing agenda to look like? We now, as many members that have been paying attention will be aware, have the government's final mandated formula through, which says that we have to build 2,600 homes in the BCP area going forward per year. That is a very, 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 very high target, and that will mean that we've got some difficult choices ahead of us. Largely, the way that you deal with that is the densification of residential premises in our more urban areas. The benefit of that is that that's where a lot of people, particularly young people, want to live anyway. So you can get a bit more, to use a phrase, bang for your buck anyway. But obviously, we want to make sure that our housing mix across the area, as we have to build these new homes, is the right one. So lots to work on, lots of bullet points there, but happy to take any questions, and really keen to try and flesh out how we can get as many members involved in this decision making as we go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I know you've mentioned the Future High Street strategy, but you'll be delighted to know that you're due to present a paper to Cabinet and, in fact, the Overview and Scrutiny Board on the 1st of February. So
we can part one then.
and also we're looking at the BCP Council Economic Development Strategy again in February. Anyway, I just mentioned that to cheer you up. So. But yeah, let's open this up to members. Councillor Vikki Slade, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In view of the fact that you're presenting those two papers in February, I'm not going to mention those two areas because I think we're limited on time, and I think we should give you about a week to write that paper before you have to think about getting it presented. So I'm not going to give you any clues. I wanted to talk to you about planning. Okay, it's a car crash. I'm really sorry to any officers that are listening. I worked incredibly hard over 18 months to try and move things forward in planning, and the number of times we were told that it was almost there and the situation was being recovered and the staff were in place, and it's just going the wrong way. And I know that you had the performance indicators this afternoon, and I was in a work meeting, so I couldn't be there. And I know planning was way below the levels like needed for government intervention. It's on your list of the areas, and my understanding from the work I've done with developers and builders over the last couple of years is that it's putting off people wanting to invest here. What do you think the solution is to resolving our problems with our planning department? And bearing in mind that our planning team still operates as 3 separate planning teams, partly because they have 3 separate local plans to deal with, would it not be easier to enable them to work under separate planning committees so that they don't have to keep learning everybody else's work? And would that not streamline things? I just think we're not going anywhere and we're not getting answers from officers. I've got planning applications that have been a year and they're for alterations to garden buildings. I'd really be interested to hear what you think the solution is, because I couldn't find a solution, and so far we haven't had a new one come through. So over to you.
Councillor Broadhead, we did cover this. We did cover this in quite some detail this afternoon, and I think there was an action there for somebody. I think leader of the council undertook to provide an action to try to sort it out, and he was going to come up with some ideas and put that forward. But I don't know if you heard that this afternoon, Councillor Broadhead. Would you like to just make a few more comments?
Yes, thank you. And I completely, it's not good enough anymore, and it's time to stop talking about it and to do something about it. The leader mentioned earlier on this, earlier on today in that section that you refer to, that it is a massive priority for us. And it's not new news. It's something that we all know. And as I mentioned, now is the time to do something about it. Councillor Slade asked me what the plan is. Well, first of all, the plan is that we need to seriously resource it. We have a number of planning applications which is akin to major cities, and we do not have a planning sector, a planning department that is that size. So we need to properly fix that, and we are coming up with a plan at the moment to put a massive injection into our regeneration and planning departments, because those two things are linked as well, particularly if we've got big ambitions around our regeneration, which we have to be, both because of our place but also because of our housing numbers. You kind of end up cutting your nose off to spite your face to do all of that stuff and then fall under your own planning system. The leader spoke earlier on today about the need to actually make sure that rather than operating under these different legacy arrangements that we have at present, we need to fix that. And I've been working really closely with the head of planning around a plan to do just that. And there's a number of things that he is working on within his department, not least around major projects, a kind of a special ops team, if you like, to really focus on some of those major projects, which take up an immense amount of resource, which then has an impact on the rest of the planning system as well. If we can have a major projects team, and the plans are really quite advanced now on how to do that, which crucially is correctly funded, which crucially actually we can probably leverage the commercial sector on, because you talk to many developers, I'm sure you have done, Councillor Slade, and they'd gladly pay more for the planning service if they got the service that they require. Well, we can and should be doing that, and there is a plan in place to bring that forward. So first of all, we need to massively, we need to make sure that the system is right, we need to make sure it's streamlined and harmonised, and we need to put some more money into it. All of those three things we are doing, and doing at pace. We've made clear that this is a massive political priority for us. The second thing, and I put it on my bullet point list, it's around design and planning briefs as well, because part of the reason that a number of our applications, particularly the major projects, take so long is because we've stumbled into a position with a number of different legacy and planning briefs that there's almost a bit of a reactive interpretation when a major planning application or even a minor planning application comes in about whether it corresponds to what the planning briefs are, often which are tremendously outdated. Now, I'd always envisioned that the local plan would help us to resolve that slightly, but that's still a bit far away. So I've tasked the team with going forward, particularly with some of our key areas where we really want to get regeneration underway, and looking forward at how we expedite some planning and design briefs. Because if we can bottom out exactly how we want the design and planning briefs, like SPDs in certain areas, and we can do that piece of work, do it well, but do it relatively speedily, it gives some certainty and some clarity to investors and developers or anybody that wants to put a planning application in an area, and also massively help streamline the process. So rather than a reactive, does that fit from a culture and heritage point of view? Does that fit what we want? Let's bottom it out. Let's do that work now. Let's choose a number of areas, and I've tasked officers with let's pick the top 10 areas where we know actually it's taking too long for planning in these areas. Let's bring forward some of the discussions about exactly what type of development we can, should, and would like to see in that area. Put that into a design and planning brief. That gives some certainty to investors, it gives some certainty to the planners, and hopefully will massively speed up the system going forward. So that's a few of the ways that we're tackling it. But I'd completely agree with Councillor Slade. It stymies the whole of your economy. I've had a number of chats with a number of bodies recently, and planning doesn't just affect developers, because who likes developers? It actually affects people who want to extend their homes. It affects shop owners. It affects businesses. And we've all had emails, I'm sure, about normal people who are being affected because it's not good enough. The time for talk has gone. The time's to do something about it. A lot of it is putting our money where our mouth is, and that's convincingly what we're going to do. But equally, we have to bottom out some of these all over the place planning briefs so that we can give some certainty, which in and of itself will help to streamline the system. It won't happen overnight, but we've made this a massive political priority, and I want to see real results in 3 to 6 months on this.
And can I just come back with a quick question? I'm being very brief because I'm conscious of time. I'm glad that we're exposing this, because it was something that I was pushing very heavily on for months, and it is very difficult when you've got staff that are unable to be agile because of the way that they have to work. But I wonder whether you've given any consideration to we have 11,000 planning applications which have not been turned into builds. That would do an incredible amount of good for our economy to get them built. It would also take the pressure off greenbelt areas in thinking that they're being targeted when there's unbuilt brownfield. Have you given any consideration to shortening the amount of time that our planning applications are valid for, in an attempt to encourage people to actually build out their approved plans? Because I know it is one of the few things which local authorities can do to actually try to move things through, and wonder if it's something that we should look at, because it does suggest in your thing that you are looking for ideas from the Overview and Scrutiny Board, as opposed to just telling us what you're going to do.
Broadhead.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Slade. Something to look at. Look, I mean, every strategy has to have a carrot and stick, doesn't it? You have to say, here's the incentive to fix it, here's the way that we are trying to fix it, and here's the negative if you don't. So it all does go in the mix, and I welcome the suggestion. I'm not absolutely convinced we have the issue that some areas do with essential, with kind of bed blocking of planning, if that makes sense. I don't look around and see massive amounts of extent planning applications that aren't being built. There are some key areas where that is happening, but that might well be something to look at in the future. But I think the actual issue we have is making sure that A, we're bringing forward new applications, and B, that we're making sure that the planning system actually deals with the applications they've got, rather than worrying about applications that have been happened in the past. But it's a valid point. It's something that you're quite right, we have in our arsenal, and something we kind of should be looking at. So thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I see Councillor Paul Hilliard's on, and if I could just ask people to think about some of the other current priorities that are listed in the paper, some of the things that I have about this evening, and this is the regeneration projects in train, Bournemouth Town Fund, Poole Town Centre, etc. Bournemouth Development Company sites, particularly the Winter Garden, some of the really that are coming. And I know the R3 economy groups, I'm not sure what that is actually, Phil, so maybe you could mention that at some point. And also the Smart Place programme, which is another important thing, which, I think probably warrants or deserves a little mention. For Paul Hilliard, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm encouraged by this more inclusive approach, because as portfolio holder will know and others will know, I look at the Cabinet Forward Plan, and then anything of interest, I will either ask the portfolio holder or ask the officer for more information. So this sort of approach where we're seeing more member seminars again is useful. So where overview and scrutiny, it's the openness of a portfolio holder to say, can I benefit from local ward councillors' input or the wider input of all? So I think it's down to that individual to be brave enough to gain the input, rather than at the last minute they have the paper, it comes to overview, and then it gets potentially attacked there because there's been no input. So yeah, look at the list. Yeah, I fully agree. The other areas I in particular think a scrutiny would be appropriate, or maybe it's more scrutiny than overview, is looking at the companies, the companies of council, like the development company, the Tricuro, potentially. I know in the former council we used to have the crime panel would sit, and then the local inspector would come to the overview and scrutiny panel to present to the wider members. Because I've always found I go to the crime panel papers, but not all the detail is captured in the minutes. So for me, some of that scrutiny is lost, and you have to rely on the crime panel to do that. But yeah, I'm pleased with what the portfolio holders listed, and certainly the regeneration of all the towns should be early involvement by all members. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, if I may, Councillor Hilliard, he does actually raise a good point, which I think, with respect, Chair, the Overview and Scrutiny Board might wish to take a further look at, and that's with regard to the companies that the BCP Council has or has inherited, and but just in general, how they're working, what value for money they offer, what pros and cons they have. But as part of that, if you do that, one of the things that I would urge, and I'd just urge it generally when you're doing these things, don't just look back. Let's look forward as well. You know, it's one thing saying we want more member involvement, but that means actually coming up with ideas as well. And actually, one of the things that I've been looking at, and the leader and I have been exploring, is actually, should we go a bit further on these companies? You know, should we be doing more of them? What's working? What isn't working? Actually, what opportunities are there? What downsides are there? We need to be informed on that. We need to take people on the journey. So the more that we can spread the load of that piece of work. So I think that would be a very welcome one. But yeah, I would urge, if you did that, also look at actually where we're quite often held up as being a really good exemplar with the companies that we're doing, from Seascape Group, Seascape Homes and Properties, slightly differently, the Bournemouth Development Company, which is a joint venture, but a number of other things that we do. A lot of people like the look of them. A lot of people ask us how they can do the same. So clearly we won't get everything right, but clearly we're doing some things right as well. So what is the appetite and ambition we have collectively to do more of that, maybe? So there could be a piece of work there.
Yeah, thank you. I've taken a note of that. Thank you. Councillor Mark Howell.
Yeah, thank you for pressing the buttons. Thank you. I've got a number of questions which are kind of grouped into 4 categories, I think. Firstly, I'd like to ask the portfolio if he could clarify the relationship between himself and the various lead members in his area, because I'm still a bit confused as to, you know, who's running the show, so to speak. You know, I know that we have one, the lead member for Bournemouth Regeneration is on the call, I think, but not for Christchurch or Poole. And, you know, so at the end of the day, somebody has to grab hold of these regeneration areas and understand everything, and you know, not drop the ball basically, and push it forward. And you know, who is that? Because when you look at the specification for the lead member roles, it seems in terms of regeneration to really push all the responsibility onto the lead members. But the lead members, well, I wouldn't like to accuse Councillor Dunlop of being backwards and coming forward, but perhaps the other 2 have been less visible. And so, yeah, if we could have an answer to that. The second point was in relation to the future High Streets bid that failed. And I'm very much, you know, it's not really a failure, isn't it, given Councillor Broadhead's view of these bids expressed in the previous session. We can always learn from them, and there's always some unexpected benefits. And I think one of the real things that we could push forward with as a council is to just carry on with the covered market proposal and make it happen ourselves. You know, it was a proposal that was welcomed, I think, across the floor, and it's achievable. It's in a defined space. It would really help Poole High Street. You know, let's make it happen. I'm a bit concerned, third point, about kind of lack of information coming out about Town Centre North and the power station site, and where we're going with that. The portfolio holder, in response in his piece in the Echo or about the future High Streets bid, he said that the administration had major plans for Poole, but those major plans haven't yet been revealed to the member advisory panel. So I'm just wondering what those major plans are. And finally, I think we really need to, as an Overview and Scrutiny Board, to set up a working party to look into the bid processes in terms really the regeneration function, and that's really bid drafting, the resources that are available, and also I think importantly the use of consultants, because I think that was a major issue in terms of the future High Streets bid. And we have we have here actually appointed the same consultants to the power station site for a project, which is interesting, let's say. But it may be worth delaying that until the administration have announced the changes that they plan, if those are imminent in terms of new funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead.
Thanks. I'll try them. First of all, with regards to lead members, well, my name is on the tin. I'm the cabinet member, so I'm the one that ultimately bears the responsibility. But I'm also not naive enough to think that I know absolutely everything and can lead on everything. And that there's an old saying that a problem shared, or maybe it should be an opportunity shared, look, we can't simultaneously say that we want to get more people involved and then criticise when people are involved. The lead members, as it is clear in their titles, hold a number of roles, and I work with a number of them because a number of them, work across different areas. And Nigel Brooks actually at the moment is working very, very hard, as I mentioned earlier on our retail strategy across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. It's an area that he knows well, and actually the paper that's coming next month, part of the catalyst of that is the work that Nigel and I have been doing, very much led by him, on how, well, A, we need to recognise that we need a strategy for the future of the high street, but B, what does that actually mean? What can we do in an immediate basis to actually try and get some tangible on the ground difference? So he's been working really hard on that, but equally he is a Christchurch councillor that has a very good and intimate knowledge of Christchurch, and as we take forward our redevelopment opportunities for all of the areas, why on earth would we not harness the time, effort and energy and experience?
Oh dear, we seem to have lost Councillor Broadhead. Oh dear.
Not such a loss.
Looks like he may have hit his computer, his computer or something.
Yeah.
I think we'll just hang on a minute. I don't know. I don't know, Claire, if you can give him a call. He's frozen, is he? Frozen. I can't see him at all. Are you with me there, Claire?
Hi, Chairman. Yeah, just to let you know, I'm just trying to remove him and invite him back into the meeting.
Okay. Whilst we're waiting for Phil to join us again, Mark, can I just tell you that we are actually constrained to one working group for the overview and scrutiny. We're constrained by resources, and sorry. Yeah, we're constrained by having one supported working group, and the one that we're going to be embarking on soon is the local plan review as the work's coming through. So that really takes up our one working group that we can hold, probably up through till about May. Now it might be, in view of what you said, that the one you suggested could follow on from that if the timing fits.
Yeah, I mean, that's it might be a little delay, but yeah, it's something because, again, it's resources. A big problem is resources, whether those resources are within our capability or the regeneration team's capability. You know, we need to get to the bottom of this, because otherwise we'll keep losing bids.
Okay. Whilst we're waiting for Phil to come back in, I'm just gonna... Oh, he's back.
Chair, I am back, although on my phone, so without video. I don't know how much of my amazing soliloquy you heard. I carried on talking about 5 minutes afterwards, which is about typical, isn't it?
We only heard the lead members bit.
Okay, yes. So I'll park that bit, if I may. You probably heard enough about that. I think that the second point that Councillor Howell raised was about the future High Streets bid in Poole, and he's quite right. You know, look, there's no such thing as a failed bid. We can always learn from these things, but it's pointless doing it if you don't learn from your failures, if that makes sense. And it's pretty clear that the reason that this one failed was because our business case that we put forward had let me just bring up the details, had a BCR, which is the business case ratio of 1:1, and the minimum requirement was 2:1. So it was pretty clear that I know we had a lot of fluffiness around what extra things it brought, but clearly, if the government say we need a certain criteria, that the lessons that we need to learn are to make sure that we actually meet that criteria. And I did hear the end of Councillor Howell's point, which I completely agree, about getting good at bid writing and having some extra work around making sure that we are adept at winning bids. It's something that I'm really keen on. It's something that we can and should, and we have traditionally done well on in the past, certainly in the preceding authority that I was in. But you don't win bids if you don't match the criteria. So I think that's the thing that we've got to learn the lesson from in the future.
Okay, can I just come back, because there were 2 other points, yes, but maybe I can summarise them very quickly, just moving on. But I think that the point you make about the bid writing is really. You're back. Yeah, the point you make about the bid writing is really crucial. But one of the things about the BCR is that the consultants that we're using couldn't come up with any projects that met that BCR. And if we hadn't put the covered market option in, we would have been putting in just the placemaking projects without any significant transformational project in. There's something about this BCR calculation that we really need to get to the bottom of and investigate, because I suspect that it's really difficult to meet, because essentially the government is asking us to get to come up with a project which is commercially viable, and if it was commercially viable, then somebody from the commercial sector would probably be doing it. And we need to be looking at other places that have won these bids and managed to get their BCs up above 2, how they actually do it. And that's one of the things the Working Party could look at. I mean, I think the only other, just to finish, just to shorten things up, the point was when we will hear something about the major plans for Poole that you talked about in the press, and particularly the area around the Dolphin Centre, the bus station, the rail, that kind of piece of work. So,
yes. Thanks, Chair. I'll just finish that point about the bids, and you know me well enough to know that I never enter into an argument, and I always try and rise above these things, but I can't really let this one slide. 80 places around the country were awarded this bid because they met the BCR. We didn't meet the BCR, and not only that, but actually, look, we've got further analysis to do on what went wrong on this, but we actually had an option in there of a BCR which was 2:1, which we decided not to pursue in favour of Councillor Howell's option of a 1:1 BCR. So it's pretty clear that if 80 other local authorities can do it, we can and should do it. But I don't want to enter into a blame game. We need to analyse this about what went wrong. But to me, it seems pretty clear that if the government tells you it's got to meet a criteria, make sure it meets a criteria. With regard to the regeneration plans, I'm really keen that we do something properly and we do something ambitious here, and I want to make sure that we include as many members as possible. Now, I don't want to say too much in a public meeting, but there are some ongoing negotiations around the Poole power station site that could unlock even further potential possibility that we need to explore the art of the possible for before really nailing what comes next. And I think it's prudent to do that and to look at that without making any decisions, so that we can then do some further member engagement here. We've got massive opportunities in the Poole area. We only get one opportunity to do it, and we need to make sure that we get on and we do it right. But key, and Councillor Howell and I have had chats about this previously, is actually just making sure that where possible we do get on and do some stuff as well. We have some relatively oven ready parts of the Poole town centre regeneration that are ready to go. We need to get some cranes in the sky. We need to show, first of all, that we're meeting our housing targets, but that Poole's going somewhere. Because if you talk to people in Poole at the moment, they don't feel any sense of optimism. All they see is successive administrations again and again, drawing pretty pictures on the pages, moving bus stations here, there and everywhere, and then not delivering it. Now is the time we need to deliver it. We don't need to try and resolve everything at once, but we do need to make sure that we, at the same time, get on with what we can get on with, but then make sure the opportunities that are in front of us, we absolutely maximise those. So I can commit that there will be further workshop, further member seminars on this, and we've bottomed out some of these issues. But you know, you've heard the leader say again and again, pace and scale. That's very much the word on the street in Poole. We've got all the natural ingredients, and it's time to actually start doing something about it.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor David Kelsey.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I'll try and keep it a little bit brief if I can. I know we all want to watch this thing at 8 o'clock with the Prime Minister. Phil, I wonder if you could just sort of mention, you keep talking about regeneration, which obviously we all want, we're all up for. In my ward, as Councillor Slade was saying earlier, we have a lot of planning permissions that are not being implemented. Now, many of the ones in my ward, for example, are hotel sites, but they all seem to be sites that are owned by one particular family who do seem to own a very large percentage of this conurbations area. What are we doing to try and get them to loosen up on what they're doing in holding the whole conurbation to account by not allowing these different hotels, etc., to move forward with their planning? I mean, I've got the 3 hotel sites that basically had planning permission, that's fallen through. I've got the Cliff End Hotel site, now been demolished for 2 years, and still we're no further forward with that particular family moving forward with doing anything on there. They're what's holding up the regeneration in this area.
Yes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Kelsey. This generally wasn't rehearsed, but I'm really glad that you raised that, because it was on my list of things to try and talk about if we had a little bit more time. Because you're exactly right. It's not such. Well, obviously it's quite important, that particular family and the command that they have over the area, but it's not out of the realms of possibility to try and fix this. And it's actually it's part of a much deeper issue, which is around what does the future of our hotel stock look like, because that is intimately involved in how we can then release sites that are maybe surplus for good quality residential. And I think one of the things that we've been exploring lately, and I've been working with officers to try and bring forward, is basically a hotel policy. I think time has gone on for too long that we've clung to the 18,000 hotel beds that we have in the area as absolutely sacrosanct. You talk to anybody in the hotel industry, we don't need that many. What we need is a certain amount, which is less, but is really, really high quality. If we can bottom that out and nail that, we can then solve multiple problems at once. We can hopefully increase the quality of our hotel stock. We can potentially release some areas to residential, but actually that can and should then be part of the consultation with the big family owners about how we can all work that together in our collective benefits. So I will hopefully be looking forward about bringing a piece of work in the future around maybe a hotel planning brief that really bottoms out what our hotel stock can and should look like. Welcome overview and scrutiny input into that process.
Thank you. Councillor Andy Hadley.
Ever so quickly, because I thank you. I appreciate your shorter time. So on smart places, I'm really interested, Phil, in the AMBI in terms of sharing with the public, the people who pay our bills, pay for all our services. The output of our smart places. I can go onto the website of the Urban Observatory and find out what the air quality is in Newcastle, or what the situation on car parking in the centre of that city is. I can't do that for BCP. We've done some really good tactical things around the beach app, about the business of the beach, around the Lansdowne and Poole High Street, but it's not presented to the public in a decent way. And I'd really like to see a strategy for how we acquire stuff well. That's the bit we seem to be doing a lot of time on. How we store it securely, and then how we present it and make it available for the public, for academics, for industry. And I don't see that in BCP. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, and I'll answer that quickly. I completely agree with Councillor Hadley. I mean, I started the Smart Place programme probably 3-4 years ago now, and it really feels like it's coming to some proper fruition now. A number of the projects that have been ongoing for some time are now, such as the Lansdowne project and others, are really starting to actually come into reality. And one of the things that it's a fantastic team. We all say, oh, the teams in the council are brilliant, and of course they all are. The Smart Place programme team is absolutely exemplary. We're very fortunate to have them, and it is certainly on the agenda about how we use that information and that Smart Place in an open and transparent way. We've just talked to and we've been doing some work with Bays and others around being an exemplar from how we can use this for exactly that purpose. So we will be looking at bringing a further paper forward about what that means, and also what's next for the Smart Place agenda as well, because I think we have some scope potentially for the council to get really involved in the next step of the Smart Place and connectivity agenda as well. So it is definitely coming, but you're quite right. There's more to do. I don't think that's because it hasn't been done. I think it's now that a lot of that effort is just coming to the fruition now. So I think very shortly we'll see the fruits of that labour.
Thank you very much. There's no one else indicating, so I want to draw this matter to a close now. It's unfortunate, really, that we've only really just touched on Councillor Broadhead's portfolio, and I think there was a suggestion that there would be an all-member seminar at some point. Am I correct with that, Councillor Broadhead?
I wouldn't necessarily say on everything. I think the ambition for the administration is to have a number of ongoing forward. Yeah. I don't think that should be in conflict with work streams that the Overview and Scrutiny Board want to do. So maybe it's worth offline the board thinking about areas that they think they can add some real value in, and we'll certainly fill in the gaps with some member workshops and seminars as well.
Certainly the budget workshop that we had was absolutely superb and gave everybody an opportunity to get into the areas that they were interested in. And regeneration is such a big part of our plans, and it touches on so many areas. I think something similar to that would be absolutely super. And the Overview and Scrutiny maybe could drill down into more detail in some of those specific areas, as we will, for example, in February, when we're looking at future high street strategy. So yeah, thanks very much for your time on that tonight, Phil. It's been fascinating, and it's a shame we don't have a little bit more time. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to move on now to the forward plan, and members will have seen the forward plan attached to the agenda or on the papers for consideration tonight. I'm just going to ask if anybody has any comments against the forward plan rather than run through it. Councillor Vikki Slade.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very supportive of it, and I think it's really important that we've managed to put on the issues that raised by Councillor Trent. I am very worried about capacity issues on our February meeting. Looking at what's on there, I can't see anything we can take off, but I'm assuming item 5, which is is not only Councillor Anderson's briefing, but also the commissioned work as well. That's a meeting on its own, really, isn't it? I'm just a bit concerned about whether we can get everything, all of item 4 and item 5 in together.
Yes, I mean the items that Councillor Trent raised, for example, I think we're undecided as to whether that could be accommodated within the portfolio holder for the environment.
And worried that we might not do them justice if we just incorporate them in there.
Well, I did actually speak to the portfolio holder this week, and he is actually intending to hold an all-member working group. Not sure when it will be, whether it be prior to our next overview and scrutiny or shortly afterwards. But when he's put that together, I'll be talking to him again just to see where the best place to put those items would be, and it may well be that it would be better for them to be addressed in his all-member working group, rather than specifically through overview and scrutiny. But I think we can work through that. And yes, I'm very conscious of the fact that the agenda is very, very tight, and we need to focus, of course, on the budget in February. So
yeah, with that in mind, is it to sort of provisionally push Councillor Trent's item to the next meeting so that we can address anything that's not covered in the member briefing that Councillor Anderson puts together?
Yes, we can, and it doesn't have to be immediately either. I mean, we've got a fairly good idea of what it is we're hoping to achieve from the meetings now. So yeah, and we can move that, and yeah.
I would rather we gave it, that we really addressed whether it covers the items he's concerned about the right time rather than rushing through.
Yeah, I'll be working this out with the portfolio holder very shortly, and as I said, we have now got a really good idea what members expect from those particular subjects. It's a question of where the best place to address them are, and it might well be that we'll have to push it further forward or whatever, or it be dealt with under that working group, for all members. So if you leave that with me, Councillor Slade, I will sort that out to get a satisfactory outcome for us. So was there anything else? Was that it? Okay, no one else wishes to speak on the forward plan. So with that, I'm just going to move to the last agenda item, which are future meeting dates, which I'm sure we've all noted. And if there are any more comments from anybody, if not, then just 2 minutes past 8, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.